is 7:02, so I'll call to order the meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States of
States of
America
America
and to
and
the
to the republic
republic for which it stands,
that
one
one
nation, under
nation
God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
with
justice for
justice
all.
for all.
Great, thank you. Um, Moving on to just any updates for Selectwomen's update. Obviously, we had a significant storm that impacted the town starting on Sunday, came into Monday. So we did end up closing town offices, which we don't take lightly, but often when the governor does a state closure of offices, we follow that, but not always, just depending on the severity of the storm. But in talking in consultation with the public work crew and the building and grounds crews, they have to spend a lot of time on the roads. And then if they're also having to make sure that all town facilities are, salted and shoveled and plowed out as well for public access, it's just a lot on them, given this storm kind of, came and then added a little bit more precipitation last night with some sleet and things like that. So, in the school district, you may have seen opted to delay tomorrow as well by 2 hours, just because of some of the challenges of getting bus stop access because of the large snow piles. But we should be okay, although I'm hearing rumors of another event that might be coming this weekend. Fingers crossed we'll be up and running pretty good by tomorrow afternoon and then go from there. But I just want to give a shout out to the crews over the weekend. It was a lot of work on their part, all the town staff that did a great job responding, and obviously all our volunteer fire department was on call. As well as the police department was out. And fortunately, no real power outage issues that I'm aware of, which to me is the biggest thing in these kinds of storms, given the frigid temperatures, but it's still going to remain really cold. So we will be having our warming center, which is the senior center, open this week. Check the website for hours, but hopefully there won't be a need if we don't have any inclement weather impacting um, the power. So that is kind of my update. But it's going to be a busy winter. So with that, I guess I open up to select women, or excuse me, liaison reports and comments by any board members.
I have just
Um, Go
I
ahead,
have two
Jen.
quick ones. So first of all, I just want to say thank you as well to the police department. I really enjoyed seeing the kind of live views of what was going on with the roads. I know that's always a question for folks, especially the day after the storm. So it was super helpful to see what roads actually looked like. So helping people to make determinations on, is it really important to go out? Because, getting the roads clean, that's important. Getting all these kids back to school, super important. And then number two, the Affordable Housing Committee just had a meeting and they are going to be coming to us in March with a re-presentation of their Affordable Housing Trust Fund proposal. So they took the feedback that they received at our last meeting and have worked on implementing that. And then the other piece of affordable housing is, as we know, the new housing bill went through, and I know Erin Mannix, our town planner, is attending a bunch of meetings as the whole state really looks to understand what the implications of that bill are. So, still waiting through that.
Great. Any other updates?
Um, Jen and I would like to report that the Capital Improvement Program Committee finished its first uh, uh, milestone today by approving for tomorrow night's hearing let's call it a first draft of the Capital Improvement Program. And the final vote on the whole package was unanimous.
Great. And I know we have the public hearing is, I think, tomorrow night for that, right? And that'll be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on the plan that was voted on. And then that will end up going to our board for review as part of our budget review process. So, and I should comment also, we had a budget workshop last Thursday, and then we canceled the one today just because of the complications with the weather. But each board is going to address some questions that we might have from the departments and the outside groups at our individual budget workshops for the Board of Selectmen. So, any other comments? No? Um, all right, moving on to citizens' comments. Do we have any hands raised?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, going once,
Oh.
going, okay. Yep,
I
hand
do,
raised.
I do see a
Please.
hand raised.
Please state your name and
Go ahead,
address.
Jim.
Jim Schmaltz, Jonathan's Landing. I had a couple of quick comments for you. First one, on the CIP meeting tomorrow, I couldn't find anything on the website with a location or Zoom link. So I'm not sure if that needs to get updated or I'm missing it somewhere. And then I know the Academy proposals are on the agenda for later this evening with you guys. And just wanted to kind of weigh in and, ask that you think about what the original intentions when the properties were donated to us. It was really done for the citizens of Madison. So, and especially for the kids, via education and that. Moving into any type of housing, it's really, as far as the public benefit, it's about 0.3% of residents in Madison would benefit from that. If it goes into a commercial, it's no different than Starbucks. You pay to go, and that's kind of it. I think, I know it will need to go to a town vote, and you've got a little bit more to go on it, or referendum. But I also believe you need to have, if this is not approved, this is the answer, whether it's demolition and grass or park or something, there needs to be a finite end to this. That's it for this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other
I just
hands
checked the
raised?
webpage quickly, and the meeting is on the home landing page of the website.
Okay, great. Any other comments? It looks like no other hands raised. There'll be a chance at the end of the meeting. All right, with that, moving on to consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as approved or as presented? Excuse me.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, great. All right, moving on to item number 7. So, all right, well, I wanted to welcome, we have the chair of the Ad Hoc Facilities Committee and David Kadamus, and I think we have some other members of the committee here as well. They've been working diligently since the end of last year. They hire, the consultants that we move forward to hiring to start that kind of review process of different properties in town, and then ultimately this will lead to a master plan. They've made quite a bit of progress. This is just an interim report to show kind of some of the findings that they've come up with. There'll be a lot further discussion, and this is not a final document at all. This is kind of in the middle of the process. But I thought it would be very helpful to kind of have this conversation now to make sure that we're on track with what the board is expecting. And then, so we can make sure that we're getting what we want out of this process when we finalize this in the coming months. So with that, I will turn it over to David Kadamus. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
John.
I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay, can everybody see that kind of presentation slide, the Board of Selectmen presentation? Good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just, at the outset, I want to reiterate what Peggy just said, but I want to thank you for asking us to update our work. As you know, we came to this committee back in the end of March in 2025 and tried to and laid out a game plan of how we would be progressing through these months that we're in now. I'd like to say that we've actually we're keeping on schedule and we're moving quite quickly. So with that, I'll move on. But I also wanted to thank you for and voice our appreciation as a committee for quickly appointing and filling vacancies. The team is really quite strong that we have now, and it's a wonderful mix of talents that are bringing lots of different perspectives that is only adding value to our work. So with that, let me just, I thought I'd reiterate a little bit about our charge, basically to develop a long-range facilities plan and property plan for the town. But as we're moving through, our purpose really and key goals are to compile that inventory, which we've completed. We're in the middle of fact finding, and I wanted to emphasize that this is a fact finding information to facilitate discussion and comprehensive planning. And once we get to that point, then obviously we'll provide advice and hopefully to get some guidance to the boards and commissioners to make sure that there's proper decisions going forward for the town. Quickly, the kinds of things that we've been doing over the last several months, we've completed the evaluation of land, buildings, operating and capital costs for all the town's facilities and owned properties. We've assembled a list of needs that are out there from a series of reports, conversations, surveys, all those kinds of core documents that are out there. We've and brought all those type of things together. We've obviously identified opportunities and some challenges that are facing us. And based on this work, we're going to be trying to move forward with developing a master plan that will give us at least a 10-year vision for the town. Those kind of key activities, as I talked about, over between 24 and 25, we did that inventory and documented all the operating and capital costs. We also gathered information on utilization, and that's been probably the largest challenge on core data because there are no formal scheduling or utilization data systems that are common for the whole town. So much of our work is based on information from existing records and staff input on that front. So far, since the spring of this past year, you've approved and the Board of Finance has approved the feasibility studies for Jeffrey Ryerson Memorial Town Hall through Antonozzi Associates, and we've been working very closely with them since the fall. We've also approved the feasibility study for the underutilized town-owned lands. The company is TPA, and who was a successful vendor for that, and they're also doing very yeoman's work on this whole thing. So now we're in the progress of coordinating with other town plans and school plans and things like the Surf Club Master Plan, the Academy EOI, and a lot of other things are out there. So we want to make sure that all these things are incorporated into our work. When I talk about a master plan, I think it's kind of useful just to have a definition that we can follow. And basically, it's a document and policy guide. It's not in stone, but it's a guide to create a vision of what we want this town and the town of Madison to look like. So our objective is to put together some sort of a comprehensive recommendations that coordinates the issue of utilization, repair, restoration, and land development all in one spot. It's different than the plan of conservation development because it goes beyond the concept of benchmarks and targets down to specific activities, coordinating repairs and restoration and actions for program. And ultimately, our goal is to break everything down into a document that documents immediate needs. And we're really thinking about the immediate needs, which is right now. These are things that should be in current budget cycles that we're in the middle of. Near-term needs, we think of it within 3 years, maybe as much as 5. And then long-term is things that are going on beyond 5 years. I would like to just articulate, though, that there's a little bit of a disclaimer here. Up to date, our work really has focused on establishing this high-level planning and feasibility plans. And at this stage, we've been based on information that we've been collected from studies, as I said, surveys, funding requests, and staff input. Once we felt that things are reasonably feasible, then it's worthwhile now to start talking with specific users and program folks and stakeholders, so that we will be moving forward if you're in agreement to start collaborating much closer with town, school, and community stakeholders to translate what we are having now in terms of feasibility issues to true concepts, designs, and actions. Couple key things. We've shown this to you in the past. The town owns about a little over 1,200 acres. 22% of that land is actually developed. We targeted a roughly 25% of vacant lands that we should be looking at for the future as future development potential. And working with TPA, we've actually culled that down to a much smaller focus right now. In addition, we're looking at space. Right now, we all know that 19% of the town's space is actually vacant. That's the 3 schools and academy. And we also know that other spaces are not fully utilized or as effectively utilized as we'd like. And then finally, we've also documented and have the details from the CIP, from the town, as well as from the schools, over $100 million of needs in the next 7 to 10 years. And that number is probably low, as that was developed over the last 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years. So I'll be anxious to hear the CIP meeting tomorrow, more information about that. And then we've come up with a whole host of program needs, and as we've gone through our work. So we want to try to tie, our current focus is to try to tie needs to opportunities here. So basically, from a needs perspective, we're really looking at educational needs and potential program growth that's out there that's coming down the line. We're looking at community spaces and those needs, and that includes things like the activities that were in the academy program that were not being met by since that effort has not gone forward. We're also trying to coordinate with the affordable housing group, as well as looking at low cost and workforce housing opportunities to help satisfy some of the demands for mid-range housing prices in the town. And then finally, we really, as part of community, is obviously recreation. That's going to really tie into us by working with the Surf Club Master Plan, because they're focusing on the recreational spaces as well as the surf club. As we're looking at the opportunities for the future, basically, how can we save and restore buildings through adaptive reuse, if at all possible? It's more cost effective, and we're reusing existing assets in a more effective way. We may find, and we're coming close to thing, that some of these spaces need to be demolished because they're just beyond their useful life. And this feasibility studies that we're in the middle of right now are telling us that it's probably not worth doing that. A key concept for us is this whole issue of optimizing capital investments by coordinating the repairs and upgrades at the same time. So I call them getting twofers. So if we can identify those issues and tie them together on the right time frame, it's going to save money in the long run for the town. Ultimately, improving utilization, and then also underutilized land to develop that to help expand our opportunities for better use of the land, as well as potential grand list enhancement. So basically, we've come and said we really need to be able to put a philosophy around our work. And so we felt that we needed to think about planning districts, if you would, to coordinate our needs and improve and come up with a more effective plan. So we've kind of targeted learning center, really, which is the schools as a natural learning site, but the Bauer Farm is right there. And in many respects, the Bauer Farm provides a lot of learning opportunities as well as community opportunities. The kind of cultural and community center really targeted Town Green and the downtown area of the town. We've grouped the government spaces, so the town campus and support functions, as one kind of category, and then obviously the recreational issues, as I mentioned before, with Beach and Rec. We've gone through now and started coming up with a list, and I'm sure this is not totally comprehensive, but I think we have a good start on this list. As you know, and several of you on the Board of Selectmen have pointed out that we're in a kind of bit of a demographic trough for the schools. So we do know that the school populations will be growing, and there will be increasing needs for academic as well as support programs in the learning area. In addition, though, there are some really urgent things. We know that Madison Youth and Family Services is currently busting out of space and is really inadequate. We also know that as we've been speaking with some of the school folks, that there's a lot of challenges for the small athletic type spaces, things like fencing, for example, as the individuals type sports that are not large group sports. There also are things like programs, after school programs like Vibe and other types of support programs that need probably, there's a conflict with space. We do think pre-K and after school programs is going to be something that's going to be challenging over both the near term and the long term, as the state provides both mandates and as also our school system wants to pursue that. We know that the Olson is scheduled for an upgrade. That's an immediate thing that's happening right now. We also know that the competition gym and the cafetorium at hand are both challenges that have been articulated in reviews in that area. From the cultural, we talked about the arts and theater spaces are kind of the things that came out of the academy plan. Community spaces also came out of there that need to be identified and planned for. A pool is always on the list of something that needs to be accommodated or at least thought of where would be the best location for it. We talked about the affordable workforce housing as well as smart development for both commercial and residential. From the government standpoint, we know that town offices are being stretched and there's some space requirements there. The DPW and grounds being consolidated on one site is right now a design that's in the middle of process. The bus garage, we know that not all the buses can be parked at the current site, so and there's challenges with their space, so we've incorporated that. There's been conversations about a regional dispatch center, though that's probably a longer term issue, although it's on our radar. Support storage is always there. And then, of course, we what will come out from the Surf Club master plan. So if we understand the programs, but then we have to say where are our targets for our spaces, we know Jeffrey Ryerson Learning and the Town Campus Learning Center are vacant spaces where maybe there are potential opportunities. We also know that Memorial Town Hall, the Powder House, Chapel, and Academy as a zone, if you will, probably should be thought of as something that be looked at as a group of buildings, and how can we coordinate programs in that area to actually make that area work more effectively for cultural as well as economic benefit of the town. Finally, the town campus DPW and bus garage those are the DPW and bus garage are far more urgent at the moment, but the town campus is spaces that need to be addressed. And then right now, as I mentioned before, of that 25% of the land, we've actually targeted down to 14 parcels or 160 acres that we're actually looking at in detail with TPA at the moment. If you
Dave,
think about the map,
Dave, just a quick interruption on that last slide. Is the facilities garage that's down at Surf Club, is that part of the sort of that band 3 right there?
yes. So that facilities garage is being designed to be coordinated with the Department of Public Works in the new facilities there on Fort Path. So we've been briefed by them on the designs and where that's going and the costs associated with that right now. So that's definitely something that we're cognizant of.
Thanks.
So if we start mapping these things, and these are conceptual ideas, and we wanted to see if they will feasibly work together. If we take Madison Youth and Family Services, we also know that the Board of Ed will need more space as programs evolve and as the population changes in town. As I understand it, in talking with them, there are several things that are located in the schools that would be moved to the Board of Ed office as the school population grows and expands across all grades. And then we also have those educational and athletic space kind of needs that we were talking about. We think Jeffrey is a good target for that space, for those type of spaces. It's putting all those educational and learning functions right on the same campus with the high school and Polson and Neck River. If that is feasible, it does release quite a bit of space at the town campus that we'll have to think about how to reprogram. As we looked at the community spaces, art and congregating kinds of issues, we felt that restoring Memorial Town Hall to its original design as an assembly space may solve that. So we'll share with you some of our findings at this stage on that. But what happens is that also releases the probate court has to be relocated, the archives as well as the chamber might have to be addressed. And the question is, where would those functions go? So we're mapping these things at this stage and a feasibility standpoint. So the core question is, do these functions fit? That's kind of the key question in our work. So the folks from Antonozzi have been working on the Jeffrey and Memorial Town Hall activities as well as Ryerson. So what they've come up with for Jeffrey, I think, is quite creative and quite thoughtful. We can accommodate the youth and family services functions in the Jeffrey space with a separate location, and you can see it's in this kind of quadrant right here. It's in pink over here, and it would have a separate entrance and a separate design. This amount of space we've allowed for here is nearly 10,000 square feet. Currently, they're around 4,500 if you and the academy plan was about 7,500. So we've allowed for that space to be designed with a potential growth opportunity, and that's kind of makes sense to think about it that way. Second, we've been wanting to put in some class types of spaces, and this is this gray area here. The reason behind that is that if we can accommodate classes there, we can preclude a change of use for the building, which actually releases a lot of triggers for renovations and saves a lot of cost. Plus, it addresses kind of other key concepts for things like the Maker Lab, for example, or potentially school to career programs that may come out in the future. So these are things that are out there. The yellow was where we felt the Board of Ed could go, and that would go in this area here. The Board of Ed would have, right now, they occupy about 6,800 square feet in the town campus. This is, again, about 10,000 square feet for that area. And then the gym and the library we felt should be renovated or opened up for athletic spaces. That kind of use. And then we obviously still have some open spaces here that we haven't even programmed at this stage. So everything seems to fit. And, by a couple other comments. If you look at the photograph here, what we would do is we would suggest a pathway that would move from the high school and would come right to this entrance right here, so that there would be a separate entrance for the academic folks, different than the entrance for youth and family services. We would connect it to Polson Middle School through this along the line of the tennis courts, and they would also be available to come in that same entrance. The Board of Ed would have its own separate entrance here as well, so that would create that. And one of the creative ideas they came up with was the idea of splitting the cafetorium so that the stage and the main area, half the area would be for the Board of Ed conference spaces and for public meetings with its own separate entrance. And then the other would be to preserve the kitchen and the other space to potentially tie into something. We're thinking, does that tie into farm to table work with Bauer Farm, for example, or some sort of a farm to table kitchen space that we're even teaching for culinary classes and things of that nature could be accommodated there. And again, it would have its own separate entrance because, as you recall, the driveway goes this way into the playground area, so that you could create a separate entrance for that way. So our initial feasibility of Jeffrey suggests that the kind of major functions that we're talking about can be not only be accommodated, but be accommodated quite nicely in this area. As we looked at Ryerson, that's far more challenging. We're really looking at partial or full demolition of the building at this stage. The challenge would be, the one thought is to, given that the pre-K, we understand the pre-K programs are moving to Brown in this year. So the core question is, if you could accommodate pre-K at either end in the Ryerson building or at the Ryerson footprint, we could accommodate that expansion of that pre-K and after-school programs in this area without and be able to push off a potential another school building several years. The challenge for this building is that we would have to, if we would remove all these upper level pods, if you would, but then we'd have to take this wall right here, which is an interior wall, and harden it as an exterior wall. That's the evaluation we're looking at right now. If that cost of doing that is just prohibitive versus demolishing the whole space. But if that cost is reasonable, we could probably restore this much smaller footprint to accommodate those other type of programs down the road. At the Town Campus Learning Center, we've concluded that those portables are well beyond their useful life and those should be demolished. I should also just note that going back to the Jeffrey, the portables here are now gone. We've taken them off the table for the renovation or for adaptive reuse of the space. So we're accommodating all of the needs at Jeffrey without the portables. So that's important. And once we get the portables removed, then we'll have an understanding about better uses of the space. But it's pretty hard to understand what to do there until we get rid of those portables. Memorial Town Hall is fascinating. One of the things that surprised us is that the current use of Memorial Town Hall is assembly. So it never was changed when it was renovated into town offices. So that actually helps us in that we don't have a substantive change of use in the building, so that the renovation or the restoration to its original design, as you can see, this was the original design, could actually occur. And given that it's on the National Register of Historic Places, we can actually we have more flexibility as local officials do in terms of the types of things that how we restore it and how effective, and and how we can save some money doing that. There are a number of repairs because the other option is if it doesn't go forward as a restoration into this theater and community space, then it's retain it as is, which means the probate efforts and the community spaces would stay there. But we're still looking at $1.1+ million of repairs. It's likely that it's probably 1.5 to 2 at this stage, since that's several years ago that was estimated. As we broke it down, though, this is kind of interesting. This is the concept drawing where we would have a balcony with fixed seating, and we'd have a lower level, as you can see right in here, that has movable seating, so that we would allow this to become a ballroom at times or a theater at times, depending on. So you could have a multi-use space. We're looking at roughly we think it's at least 200 seats. We're hoping to try to get more. It's pretty equivalent. It's a little smaller than the Cape. I think that's maybe 25 or 30 seats smaller. But just to give you some concept, it seems like it would work. We try to make a connection, as you can see over here, to the powder house, so that the powder house would be connected and be brought in for support space or congregating space. And the lower level, we can open that up for either support space or congregating space. So we haven't decided that yet, but obviously the whole program seems to fit in a pretty creative way, and is rather impressive in how they're thinking. I should note that they have a theater consultant that's part of their team at Antonozzi. This gentleman named Michael Mell, who's from Theater Design Incorporated out of New York. And he's been deeply involved in this whole concept of whether it's a theater that can actually be effective and be used in a positive way. So he's pretty excited about it as well.
Do we have a sense of cost comparison? You mentioned 1.1 or whatever or more for the renovation. What would the cost of the theater be? Just order
We're really
magnitude.
not sure at this stage. We're in the middle of doing the cost estimating right now. So I think it's a little premature for me to even give a order of magnitude on that at this stage.
I'm assuming it's higher than 1.1. That would
Yes.
just
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
There's no
Okay.
doubt. It
All right.
is definitely higher than 1.1.
Okay.
John, do you have something you can add to that?
Well, not so much in terms of dollars, but I just wanted to point out that um, the Antonozzi is also working at this point on reviewing the structural situation, reviewing the mechanical electrical situation more thoroughly. So those are two integral things into putting those numbers together. And because of that, there actually really, or partly because of that, there actually isn't really any number that we would have that would answer that at this point. But this is, as Dave pointed out, this is the same consultant that's working with us on Jeffrey and Ryerson. And they're a creative group, and they've really dug into this, and actually they're enthusiastic about the whole thing. So they're good people to be working with.
Yeah, and I just want to weigh in that the goal at the end of this process is to have some sort of, concept numbers. As we know, these are only estimates, but it'll give you an order of, magnitude for each of the different options. So you have an understanding of expenses for each piece of everything that we're talking about.
And we're in the middle of right now estimating for Memorial Town Hall, estimating for Jeffrey, as well as estimating for Ryerson and the Learning Center. So all those are in the midst, and we're actually going to put an estimate on what would be the secondary renovations at the town campus, for example, to move those other spaces. So all those things will have estimates to them, and and that's all just part of the long range plan. So the third kind of piece is of a third leg of the stool, if you will. You got the program side, you got the building side, and you got the land side. The interesting thing about the land is that what we're doing is we're evaluating those properties right now in order whether they should be retained or we could potentially divest those properties from the town. If we retain it, should be for other town uses or for open spaces, what's appropriate. And if it's divested, then we would prepare some kind of developmental plans that would have uh, kind of global designs, if you would, large scale designs that would say these are the types of housing or types of functions that can go there. This is the water supply, the infrastructure. This is how it's satisfactory for septic and for soils, and all those kinds of things would be there, so that developers would have basically they'd get a head start on the job and would not have to go through developing a lot of those core plans on their own. So, and then obviously, but all this would have to go through some sort of RFP process going forward if they were to be developed. So specifically what we've done is TPA has gone through now and they've mapped all these spaces. And this is an example I use. I like this only because it has every kind of thing in on one space. And this is where the buses are right now. Uh, as you look at it, they've identified the property in red outline. They also identify every adjacent property and who owns it, and those type of things. The blue is the wetlands. This blue line here is the wetland setback. And then obviously this is existing type of spaces. So there are some opportunities to expand, we think, potentially into this area for the bus garage, for example. So right now we're saying we think the buses should stay here rather than be moved somewhere else. And we think there are opportunities to better use this existing parcel to really help it out. And we're feeling the similar kind of situation at the DPW at Fort Path, for example. Basically, we have this, and now we're in the middle of evaluating the setbacks, terrain, soils, infrastructure, what's available, how the roads, all those kinds of things, in order to come up with a capital impact. Because if our goal here, honestly, is to try to keep these plans as cost neutral to the town as possible. So if we can expand the grand list to cover the costs of Jeffrey, Ryerson, Memorial Town Hall, those kind of things, then all the better, especially if you can coordinate with the existing resources or grants. So that's our game plan of what we're trying to do here. So these are the sites we've looked at. There are two sites that we looked at. County Road was one that was asked, that the Affordable Housing Group asked us to look at. That is not developable. We've gone through it and it's not going to work. We looked at the almost 5 acres that's north of because the train station where the over-unders plan to go potentially is proposed to go. We own the space between the train tracks and the old police station. So the core question is, could we do anything there in that space, as it's a kind of a prime commercial area in the town? It does not look that way. That does not look developable either. So we've kind of taken those out. We've looked at the space on Durham Road, which is adjacent just north of Ryerson and Brown. We think that has good potential. We need to understand potential access and infrastructure issues there, especially for water, for developing that. So we're looking at that right now. Ridge Road is fascinating. We've got almost 100 acres on Ridge Road, and they're all adjacent parcels. So if we look at that, and that is, again, another good potential. We believe that there is public water that's serving these spaces, which is an additional benefit. And obviously, we're managing to wetlands and septics and those type of things at this stage. On Cops Road, we're looking at at the Bauer Farm. There's the space that's east of Cops Road. There is a potential there to do some affordable housing. And we're looking at the feasibility of that. We're a long way from that yet of any recommendations, but nonetheless, that was part of the Bauer family deed as one of the uses of the space. And we do know that that's a need in the town. The Town Campus Learning Center, we think, has a good potential. It's probably going to go for town use. But again, we're going to have to understand the space better once we get the portables out of there. And the DPW is 2 parcels that are on Fort Path. We're looking at probably retaining that for the existing purpose. We've looked at the designs, and we've had presentations from the folks from DPW and from Ben. And, as we've looked at it, although yes, it's going to be challenging with some of the terrain issues and some of the excavating requirements, if you moved it somewhere else in town, we'd have to do all the infrastructure issues. And I think those costs are roughly equivalent, by putting in gas and fuel tanks and things of that nature, and as well as the kind of infrastructure requirements. So those are the spaces we're looking at right now, and we think that have some potential. John, did you have a comment there?
The other thing I was going to just insert there is that there were actually a surprising number of spaces of town-owned property, many of which have they're not large enough or big or worth considering enough to even put into a study like this. We were actually very surprised at how many of those there were. But these are the ones that make sense to look at that are worthwhile parcels of property. There are those other pieces, and I don't, we're not focusing on them, but they're not significant.
Yeah, and I just note that in their evaluation, they found a lot of record-keeping discrepancies. So things that are identified as municipal or natural diversity databases, but they're not necessarily deeded that way, or the other records in other areas are conflictory. So we're trying to regulate all those things. Our next step is to actually get out to these properties and really start doing some physical site visitations on that. Probably a little bit of challenge with all the snow right now, but hopefully we can get to that pretty soon. So in closing, basically, we've affected approximately 70% of the existing facilities by our plan so far. And we're roughly looking at 25% of the vacant land in town, if you would, that we've looked at. Obviously, the surf club and recreation fields will really be a major coordination on our planning efforts. So far, we have not looked at, and probably will look at it in the future, but right now we don't see pressing needs at the police station, ambulance center, the senior center, Brown, Neck River Schools, the town campus, and Lee Academy. So the town campus gym, I should say, in Lee Academy. So those spaces we're really haven't looked at this stage. And right now, we also have to do some sort of town affiliated coordination, things like the library as well as the fire station. So those things we have to take into account, because as we add development or potential development, does that affect those some of the services in town? So and with that, I guess our next steps are is that we want to take this from illustrative concepts to feasibility designs by talking to various stakeholders throughout the town, school, and community. We'll be working hard to understand these capital investments, and I think the capital investments will take better shape once we get some feedback from stakeholders as well in terms of the concepts and whether or not these are working. We will come up with a feasibility and planning coordination on what would be the grand list impact if any of this development could occur, so that ultimately you'd be able to see a cost as well as a revenue offsets in terms of how these things can be funded. And then finally integrating with the Academy expression of interests as well as the Surf Club planning process. We're pushing hard to get this all done by the spring. So a lot's been done in the last 8 months, and we're really pushing hard over the next 3 or 4 months to continue on. So with that, I'm happy to take any other discussions or questions.
David, if you don't mind, I know we had a chance to talk about this yesterday, but for the benefit of the public, I think it would be helpful for them to hear from you as well. I know I was surprised to see a potential need for pre-K classroom space at the old Ryerson site, given the fact that we just built the new schools with the anticipation that it was going to cover all of our educational needs for our students. So just for the benefit of the public, can you go through what we talked about yesterday as to why that's part of the discussion with this study?
Sure. Basically, we're looking at the state is pushing and mandating greater levels of pre-K programs across the state in the public school systems. In talking with Dr. Cook and understanding it a little bit more at this stage, they're talking, I think it's 5 to 7 pre-K classrooms would be the kind of goal to ultimately get to that would actually take the pressure off of other spaces. Because right now, pre-K is some of it, I believe, is at Neck River, but then it's also being planned to be moved to Brown. So it's not in ideal spaces at this point in time. So so a big part of this is state mandated, but also our desire as a school system, I guess, to move forward with these pre-K and after school programs. So I hope that helps. Does that answer your question?
It does, regarding the pre-K. With the after-school programming, so this is something I forgot to ask. What after-school programs would they be looking to move there? Would that be things like youth sports, or is that more so like the after-school programs that Beach and Rec run?
I think it would be more like the after-school programs that Beach and Rec runs, or just, for families where the parents are working and they need an after-school program to accommodate until they can be picked up a little later in the day, after dismissal.
Did Dr. Cook give any indication as to whether or not um, that would only be for the students that are up at the north end of town at Brown, or if would Neck River students be taken up there as well?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't have an answer to that. I think that's one of the stakeholder kind of conversations we need to have to understand those programs more deeply. And that's kind of a next step. But because at this stage, we hadn't really anticipated putting pre-K or after-school programs in any of these buildings until some of these conversations started to take place. And now as they've taken place, they've looked to become a higher priority, certainly in that kind of near term, kind of 3 to 4 year horizon. So we're
Oh,
trying
three
to
to four
figure out
years.
how to anticipate it. It's not a tomorrow thing. Let me put it that
Mhm.
way.
I also want to highlight this was just through conversations with the superintendent that were more like strategic discussions, not there's no existing plans to do this. There's no, the Board of Education has not been involved in this process. So this is the first step, right? To like, okay, what
Correct.
should we be starting to think about? And if these are issues that you might have, how do we address them with these facilities? Let's think ahead,
Mhm.
because this is a 10-year plus plan. It's not about next 2 to 3 years, it's about the next 10 years plus, right? So,
Oh, no,
yeah.
100%. I just, for the benefit of the public, because that was kind of the understanding with the new school,
Mhm.
with the school plan, with the new school construction plan, that was kind of the understanding that I think a lot of the public had, is that this was going to kind of handle our situation for a significant period of time. And so I just, want to get as many questions out as I can, even in this early stage of the planning process, and I wouldn't even say planning process, early stage of the discussion process, just because I'm sure it just even seeing this on a presentation or hearing this on a presentation, could
Mhm.
be, kind of surprising to the public given the new construction we just went through.
I would just add
Sure.
that basically what we're doing is releasing spaces out of Neck River and Brown to accommodate population growth so you can avoid building a school for several years. I mean, the demographics suggest, at least the demographic studies I've seen suggest that we're looking at a challenge in the mid 2030s. By dealing with the pre-K and releasing other spaces, we're probably looking at late 2030s to early 2040s before a new school. So by kind of anticipating these needs and thinking of creative ways of addressing them, we can avoid major capital investments, maybe a whole 5 to 7 years.
think we talked about two guys at our last Board of Selectmen meeting, or maybe it was two ago, having Dr. Cook or members of the Board of Education come and talk to us a little bit more just about the sort of the long range planning, given the sort of surprising move that was made from Neck River to Brown, and we just want to make sure we're all sort of on the same page from a communication line standpoint. So, maybe that's something we can consider for a future agenda is just, really talking to the Board of Ed and just ensuring that we understand sort of the vision and the strategy going forward.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's important for
So,
us to be on the same page and not creating stories, but having real discussions.
Yeah.
right. But just as a little history discussion here, um, the Board of Education, the school administration said that Ryerson was not fit to be renovated as a school. That the reason it wasn't going to be renovated was because it just couldn't be done. And we're spending money now with design firms, architects, whatever they are, to evaluate exactly that. We're not in the discussion phase. We are in the planning phase for this. And we have skipped the discussion phase entirely, and we seem to be ignoring the previous administration or the Board of Ed, and their urging for a new school that Ryerson just wasn't suitable. Talk about tearing it down and building a new school, that's a different conversation. But renovating that school was off the table, not by the town, but by the Board of Ed and the administration. And not for nothing, when the new school was being discussed, the administration and the Board of Ed went to great pains to say that these new facilities, as designed, would take the needs of the town for many, many, many years. And clearly they're not. So that's a different conversation. We can stick a pin in that. But I'm trying to understand, and Peggy, maybe I'm going to direct this question to you. Has the administration, the school district, tasked this committee, Dave's committee, with figuring out its future needs for space? Or are they working on the exact same thing and coming back to us with their own data? I'm trying to figure out where this is, how this is all working.
As I said before, this process started with conversations with the superintendent, not the Board of Education, about long-term needs. And if you recall, we talked about this back a while ago about Ryerson. We thought it would be prudent rather than rushing to spend $3 million to tear it down if there was a useful purpose for part of the building. And that's all that they did. And what came out of those, he's matching up a possible need with a building that's already existing. That's all. This is not the school district didn't say, "Hey, we'd love to take Ryerson and turn it into pre-K." This is what the consultants and the committee is trying to start. They're generating ideas, they're looking at options, and they're putting things out there for discussion. This is not an endorsed plan. This is a here are all these pieces, let's organize our thinking and then start to solve problems, right? So I wouldn't rush to assume this is anything more than a conversation about potential ways we can use our buildings in town. It's a planning process, Bruce. Just like when they did the tri-board planning process that you were involved in, this was way back in like 2015, right? 10 years ago. They threw up, remember they had like 15 scenarios, right? Of all the different ways you could configure the school buildings in town and suit the needs of what the school district that felt it needed. And this was 10 years ago. And they whittled it down over time into something that they felt was feasible and also cost effective, right? And that was the Madison renewal plan. So I'd say we're right now at that same point. We're like 15 different things out there, all these moving parts. And then eventually it'll start whittling down. You have to screen all this and say, is it feasible? Is it needed? Is it cost effective? And that's going to be the next phase of this. So um,
So the
The
administration has asked
committee,
that
yeah,
the
Can I
district,
just
the
add
school
something?
district is asking the town to evaluate the possibility
no,
of converting
Let's not
no,
let's not put
that's
words
not
in the
what
Board
they
of Ed's
did. I
mouth.
told you there was
Let's
a
have them come and
conversation
talk to
about
us.
needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so David, the committee, is the creative piece of this that is trying to match different needs up with different facilities. The school district has not come and asked for any of this. They just said, here's some things we got to think about over the next 5 to 10 years.
If I could
Okay, fair
add one
point. So fair
thing.
enough. But the district has said in the past, Ryerson is not suitable for education moving forward. Now we are looking at an education use for that building. I would like the district to come back and say, you know what, we think that probably can be used. You know, if you want to explore that space for that, we'd be okay with that. I'm worried that we are exploring a use for a customer that is going to say, no, we already told you that's not a good space for us.
Let me just add two things, Bruce, and maybe I can help with this, why we're looking at it this way. First off, we're only spending a relatively small fraction of the consulting money for Antonozzi on Ryerson because it's a high level look. Number one. Number two, the most significant parts of the building will be demolished. We know that those northern end pods are, that's where all the ramps are. That's where all the change of levels are, and what makes it very complicated for ongoing current education functions. The southern area where the cafetorium is and that entrance, those are relatively all on the same level and are spaces that are smaller and more appropriate for that kind of pre-K kind of programming. That's the only reason we looked at it. Now, Antonozzi, they've had significant amount of school experience and have looked at, and they've designed schools, renovated them, all those kinds of things. And so that's the reason we asked them to look at just that front end of the building. And honestly, I'm not sure it's even feasible. I really don't know at this stage. It's early on. I think hardening those walls that are interior walls to make them exterior walls and all the mechanical requirements, probably going to say, I don't think this is going to work. Honestly, I think we've probably confirming that, but we thought it may be useful just to, from a high level feasibility planning of throwing a number of things up there, to say, all right, is there some way to save this and accomplish a program need without uh, higher cost than what is necessary? And that's all we're at right now.
Well, I
Again,
mean,
guys,
I'm not doing a
can we
very
just
good
have
job
the
of hiding that I really, I think we're going in the wrong direction, but I would like to move on if we could.
yeah, let's have the
Um,
Board of Ed just come and talk to us like we committed to. I think that's the easiest solution is we can ask all the questions directly. They can be in the room and we can have an open and candid conversation about their plans. I think
that's fine. That's great.
we're being very speculative right now. So I agree. Let's move on.
And they have not seen this. Now, there's a
Yeah.
member of the Board of Ed
Right.
on the committee, Seth, the chair, but they have not seen this presentation. They're going to be seeing it soon in a more abbreviated way, but they are not actively involved in this planning process yet. This is the committee that is reaching out selectively sometimes to the school district.
Sure, sure. One of your early slides, you talked about the purpose of the committee, and the first one is the inventory of town buildings and land. Um, I don't believe I've received that. Would it be possible to get that inventory?
Yes, I'll be happy to send it to you.
All right. You mentioned, I
Hey,
think,
Dave, just send it to Jeannie and Jeannie will send it to all of us.
Okay.
That was the interim report that you
Yeah.
received, or the report
Yeah.
that you
I think we
received
have
last
it.
year. And it's available on the website, I think, too, just so you know. But you did get that, but we can send it back out.
In
so
the
you
slide
mentioned,
deck on the interim report was a list of all the buildings and also, I believe, a list of all the 82 properties and their addresses and those kind of things, their acreages and whether they're vacant or not, that kind of thing. Plus, we identified major capital.
you
I'll be happy to put it together.
you mentioned the difficulty in compiling usage data on the different spaces. For understandable reasons, we don't have a system for doing that. You mentioned you were doing some anecdotal data collection.
Yeah, we were talking to various departments and people that are using those spaces and what's being scheduled and what's not and that kind of stuff. So,
Right. I would say to us as a board, understanding the needs can only be done in the context of understanding where we are today with some certainty. And I think we've all heard, oh, the senior center isn't used so much. Why are we, it's barely used. Why are we adding more community space? That's a community space. I don't think we believe that. We believe that building has got a fairly high utilization. But what we can't do is we can't point to any data that says it is or that it's not. And I think that's pretty unsatisfying to the public in general when we can't do that. I would think that understanding our current state of facilities would be core to any productive conversation moving forward with our future state.
I think that there's two challenges on the utilization, and I think one of which we can address and one we can't very easily. The first one that we can address is knowing when the spaces are open and whether or not the spaces are scheduled for use. So we can gather a lot of that information. We don't know how intensely the spaces are used. So, example, a conference room that sits 50 people, we don't know if there's one or 45. So when you go to the intensity of utilization, that's going to be the biggest challenge, and that we'll have to go more anecdotally on that one. I think we can actually document pretty well whether or not what are the hours of operations on buildings and what spaces are utilized during those hours of operations, yes or no, kind of thing.
And I think, at least as a starting point, that would be okay, right? I mean, so to use your example, knowing that a 50-person room is booked 80% of the time is valuable information.
Right.
The secondary, for 50% of that time, it's booked by 5 people, not 50 people, right? It's the space is underutilized, but maybe that's because there isn't a smaller space or something else that's available. So just knowing that the space is being booked is important data for us. And I think to the extent that we can help you do that, and in that data collection, I think we should. Again, because I don't know how we have a meaningful discussion about the future without understanding the present. This is a bit of an editorial, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you mind if we mix it up a little bit? So,
Sure.
I guess, Dave, appreciate the presentation. I thought it was awesome. And thanks for all the hard work from the team. I know many of you guys are here tonight. I am curious, one of the things that sort of stood out to me in the last presentation that you guys made to us was about sort of the notion of prioritization. And I'm not sure how that might play out in the context of the master plan going forward, but I guess that's something that I might be interested in, and maybe others as well, on just sort of the priority of projects, whether it be, the Jeffrey is more of a higher priority than Memorial Town Hall, as an example, something like that. So I'm just putting it out there as something to think about.
Yeah, no, well, that's that one slide that I provided and we'll send to you is that talked about the programs and we put into immediate, near term, long term. So that's in essence given us some prioritization. So you're absolutely correct. Jeffrey right now would be a higher priority because there are more immediate program requirements that would fit there. Memorial Town Hall is a secondary action, and Ryerson is even a tertiary action on that type of stuff. Longer term action, because you'll notice I put pre-K as long-term issue, midterm and long-term. So that table, in many respects, the program drives the immediacy, I think.
Dave, I hadn't had a chance to jump in here yet.
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I have two things, Dave. First of all, I think your committee should have a conversation with the Board of Police Commissioners because they have begun to discuss some of their future needs and locations. And I think this would be the right moment to get that data assembled by your committee.
Okay.
And the second thing, Dave, I wanted to ask you, is there anything the selectmen can do tonight to help speed along your committee's efforts?
I mean, the big thing is we're going to be really just pushing through. We've had tremendous support from the various town organizations. I mean, planning office has been very helpful. Facilities has been lights out. They've been terrific. It couldn't be better. So we're not running into a lot of any kind of really, I don't know, hurdles, if you would. I don't think. I think we're doing pretty well. I will be, if I feel uncomfortable, I'll be happy to go to you and Peggy and ask for help. I'm not bashful, as you know.
Done this a few times, Dave.
So to pick up on my thought, a couple of different times you're referring to town green spaces underutilized. And I think that's an unfortunate way to refer to green space. I think, and I say this to the board members, um, this is a significant policy decision to consider town development on existing green space, to consider divestiture and increasing density. These are big public policy decisions. And before anybody goes too far down that path, I think we need to have some clarity. Is that something we want for Madison? Do we want to sacrifice green space? Do we want to increase density? Um, I,
Bruce, I 100% agree. All this committee is doing right now is saying if we choose to do that, there are town-owned properties that would be the best candidates for that. This is, and then any decision ultimately, especially dealing with any kind of development proposal on town-owned land, is going to be a public decision ultimately by the voters of this town. Once again, this is a master planning process, identifying options for town-owned buildings and land. The committee's not making decisions, it's just saying if you're going to do it, you're better off developing this parcel versus that parcel because maybe that parcel has too much wetlands on it or it's not in a good location because it's strategically next to a town facility. So this board would be the one that would say, do we want to pursue development? And we haven't made that decision yet.
so
So I would
when
agree
are
with
we
that.
going to have that? When are we going to have that discussion? Because my fear is that, well, let's, so we can play this out a couple of ways. Let's say that we decide as a board we want to do that. Then this work by this committee has been well done and with some foresight. But if this board said we don't want to divest or further develop town green space of any type, then this work will have all been for naught.
That's,
So,
I mean, come on, Bruce. This is taking, we've never had a list of inventory of town-owned property. Nothing. So this whole process is what most corporations, universities, the federal government, they do this. They collect information and it creates a library of information. So now maybe our board doesn't want to pursue this, but maybe 10 years from now, there might be a different conversation. Now you've got here are properties that are developable or not developable. And it also takes out of the conversation the arguments that people are making about where we have actual buildings on them, right? One of the, conversations about Ryerson and, why don't we sell it off? I mean, this all comes up as we try to make decisions for those buildings. Those conversations always come up by the public, right? Why aren't we developing this? Why aren't we tearing it down and building that? That's the conversation we're going on with Academy right now. So this is about a plan. This is a planning exercise. And so I just think that you're raising all relevant, important issues that we have to talk about as a board, but the committee is giving us the information to help us make those decisions.
Recommending body, right?
No,
They're
I
recommending
would,
to the Board of Selectmen, right? For us to
I,
then understand and then ultimately take to the public even further, right? So, I think there's multiple steps here.
well, I would say that we don't need, I have no quarrel with the inventory at all. I would love to see it have actual usage and capacity data with it. I think it then becomes a powerful document. The inventory is nice, but it's not complete in my mind. Um, but as a policy discussion, the development of town-owned property into anything is a policy discussion we can have absent of all of that data. Now we have it, so we don't
How
have to
can
have
you
it.
make an educated decision about whether or not it's appropriate to develop town land without having any facts about the town land and whether it's even developable? Why would we have a debate about let's go develop the bus garage down on off of Route 1 without even knowing if it's feasible? I'd rather
We
know that
know,
that's off the table or, I mean, this is just gathering facts.
we
How can you
know.
make that decision?
Sure, sure. I actually I could start that discussion tonight. We know that there is at least some land in Madison that is developable and suitable for housing, industrial, recreation, municipal. How much and exactly where? Maybe we don't know. But we know in the hypothetical that that land exists. As a policy discussion, do we want to explore developing for residential, for industrial, for commercial, for recreational? I think that policy discussion doesn't need a fine point on all the data. But like we've said already, we do know the land inventory. So we do know. And you stay away from the bus one, right, which got a lot of wetlands and it's an odd shape and it's next to the railroad tracks. Maybe you push that one aside. We've got Bauer Park land. We've got other pieces of wooded properties that that
But we know
would
this
seemingly
because
be.
we've gone through the exercise of having
I'll
experts
be
look
honest
at
with
the
you, Bruce.
land. Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're looking for. Are you looking for a policy about housing? Help me understand. I really don't understand.
Do we want to further develop undeveloped land owned by Madison for fill in the blank?
XYZ.
Fill in the blank for housing. Housing is the discussion. Housing
How do
keeps
you
coming,
how do you
right?
talk how do you talk about any piece of property without knowing whether or not it's okay to do something on? I mean, don't you need data?
Well, I think we need the community on board with it. It's a very public discussion. Do the residents of Madison want to see more residents of Madison?
The core question we raised, very simple question, was when I first presented to you that there was 1,217 acres, all of the people on the Board of Selectmen and all the people on the Board of Finance were surprised that the town owned that much. Thanks to Al's push and your push, Bruce, we actually drilled down deeper and found that there were only roughly, excluding Rockland, about 250 acres that were 5 to 7+ acres that are things that you could actually even consider. So you take Rockland off the table, 600 some odd acres, take out the town buildings, which is a couple of hundred acres, and then what's left, and you take all the small stuff, less than an acre, 2 acres, that kind of stuff. That's really just very small. Then you come down to just a handful of spaces. Those handful of spaces were about 30 spaces that we dropped down to 16. And of that 16, we dropped that down even further now to about 4 or 5 that are large enough in town that you could actually feasibly potentially do something with. And that's all we're at. It's up to you guys what you want to do with it. But I think our job as part of the plan is to say, if you could do something with it, how could that affect this plan? Is that a potential benefit to the town from a grand list perspective. It can help fund some of these other types of projects and needs so that you don't have to do that. And those are the trade-offs. But ultimately, that's all our goal is just at that kind of high level. Can we put a pin in it and say, is this something worth coming back and talking about in the future? So that's where we're at. And
So
I'm
back to
happy
my
to give you.
editorial, I think underutilized is an unfortunate way to say it. And so
Better
undeveloped is one
word.
thing. I will point out that there is a property that you missed, and that is the Lesage property next to Jeffrey.
Yes,
That's got the red house on it.
Yes, no, I
It
know
is.
the property. We're actually looking at that. We haven't really gotten into it at the moment, but that's on our target list.
Okay, because I mean, maybe it's a candidate for just carving it off as its own house lot and selling it, and hopefully somebody would restore it back to its historical grandeur. But right now it's what slowly or quickly falling apart, right?
Yeah,
But
I
until
mean,
you
my
investigate it,
understanding of the
you can't
history
make
is
that
that it was
determination.
purchased for potential recreational uses of the school to expand into. So we want to look at it as a potential site for maybe some other type of future development as an option, or should it be kept at what it is?
I like the process we're engaged in. I believe the spirit of the charter is that the role of the selectmen to frame the issue so that the public has enough knowledge and information to make a decision, a choice. And I feel like that's what we're doing right now. We're gathering information, and we will eventually weave that information into proposals that the public can react to. But without doing all the fact finding and analyzing, there's nothing to offer the public to react to. So at this point, I'd like to see us move on. I'd like to see us wish Dave and his committee um, uh, utmost speed as they get back to us. And I'm not sure there's anything else we can contribute to Dave tonight. We've reacted to what he's told us, and I think it's time for us to move on.
I do have one more question, and I think it's pertinent to another agenda item that we have tonight, which is discussing next steps about Academy. And I'm just wondering, David, if your committee is working on any sort of statement to the Board of Selectmen about what your committee opinion is on the Academy proposals. I know we've received one from the Economic Development Commission. And then also if Antonazi has, any input on impacts of what the community might decide to do with the Academy property. Just, because as we're entering these discussions, I think it's important for us to have as much information as we can have to be best informed and make good presentations to the public.
Agreed.
At our last
Great point, Jen. I think to me, we've been asking for a master plan now for a couple of years. I mean, I was on the original facilities committee where we started the process, and Dave and his committee have now taken it down this path of providing us with some really good recommendations and options. And let's understand that that's what they are. They're just recommendations. We have an opportunity now as the Board of Selectmen to look at this master plan and make some decisions accordingly that then would be voted on by the public. No decisions have been made. No decisions have been made about pre-K. No decisions have been made about a theater in Memorial Town Hall. No decisions have been made about Academy. No decisions have been made. We're just looking at options. And I think we can't state that any clearer at this point. We're just looking at options. And I think that's the point of a master plan, is to make sure that we really thoroughly understand the Madison landscape and what are our options for the available land that we have.
I just answering Jen's question. Peggy tasked us at our last meeting to prepare a statement on Academy. All the members either had been in attendance at the expressions of interest and or have watched all the things. We formed a subcommittee of 3 of us that have actually drafted our perspective on it right now, but it's in draft form. And we're going to be reviewing it at our next committee meeting and then giving it to you all.
So
Great,
maybe
thank
this
you.
is a good segue into the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Jen. You made that easy. And I just want to echo Scott's thing that, ever since I started in this office, every time a decision was made, there would be a discussion about, well, what's the bigger plan? How are all these other, stop making decisions in silos. And that's was the criticism of the town is, we were making one-off decisions on buildings. The goal of this is with all town land and buildings is to have a 10, 20-year horizon to look at. And so if we make a decision, we understand how it impacts all these other things in town. That's what this plan is about. So we'll move on to our next very fun topic. And I just want to echo also, and I know everybody here appreciates all the work that's being done. And it's a lot of time and attention by volunteers who fortunately have a lot of expertise in this area. So we're benefiting from people who have experience in this area, and we're very appreciative of it. So we will be seeing them again. And continue the conversation. And you can come to the facilities committee meetings if you want to ever attend them. So they meet once a month. They're public noticed, and the public is welcome to attend. So there was I guess, is this one of the committee members? John, did you have one last comment you wanted to make before we move on?
It is.
No? Okay.
No, I hit the button by mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Thanks for your
Okey-doke.
patience. Good conversation, though. That's what we should be doing, right? We're debating and deliberating and trying to move forward. So with that, item number 8 is discuss the next steps on the academy EOE process, EOI process, sorry. And I thought I did put just some uh, thoughts on a slide just to help guide our conversation. So I just want to, why is that not showing up here? My slide. Hold on a second. Okay, that is there. Just trying to share it here. Um, Here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I just thought helpful to remind kind of where we are from a process standpoint. The board talked about this at several meetings actually in June. I just highlighted this one about some of the goals of this process would be. And not to say that some board members agree with those goals, but it was more, let's just take this another step. We had a working group that put together a draft that was circulated to the board of what ultimately, rather than doing a formal request for a proposal, we did an expression of interest process because we didn't have a lot of specifics. We didn't know if we wanted to say housing. We wanted to see what the market was interested in for this building. So it was kind of test the market to see if the building could be reused for something else. The process was launched, the EOI process, and end of August. We received 4 expressions of interest back the end of October. The board met on the 13th and had a big discussion about, there was a lot of questions, more than answers that came out of that, but all intrigued by some of the proposals. And so we decided to invite them back. We also had a professional from Michael Harris from Rex Development, which is kind of a state economic development agency, to assist us. And then we decided to invite all 4 back for presentations. Those happened in January. I know this seems to have dragged on, but it was really hard to get this scheduled in December, and we thought let's just do it beginning of the year. And so those presentations, I think, were well attended by both members of the public, and we had an opportunity to ask some good questions. And so now we got to decide what we want to do next. And so after talking to different people, there was still a lot of questions. We've gotten a lot of emails from members of the public raising issues with each of the proposals. And I think a lot of people want to kind of circle in and get some of these questions answered. And so, my thinking on this, and I shared this with some of you board members offline before this, was let's first of all go to our own town staff who have expertise in all these areas. There was a lot of questions raised about septic feasibility and constraints given the four different proposals that all had different uses. So let's talk to the health department and see what the issues are, knowing especially all the data that we've collected from the academy process, and then knowing kind of some of the issues and constraints in the area. Talking to planning and zoning, anything that's being recommended right now would require some sort of zoning changes. And so we'd have to do that cooperatively with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So what would those be for each of them? What would be required? So we understand that, this is the process that would have to happen for zoning. Parking requirements came up quite a lot. People were very concerned. What was it feasible? Were these realistic? And so kind of looking at the proposals and what the challenges there would be for parking. And then also a conversation about how they would impact adjacent municipal facilities in the ball fields. Some were proposing additions. So, and then also how that might have a knock-on effect, to some of the other municipal buildings there. Then grand list impact. There was lots of kind of talk about generating revenue. What would actually happen? We have some examples to look at in town in terms of housing development as well as a hotel. So what would that look like in terms of adding to the grand list and providing possible revenue to the town? And then there was some of the proposers were recommending the town contribute in either repurposing a grant. So is that even an option? And what would that look like? So the staff has started to work on a lot of these things, but I thought it would be good to have the board, just formally say, yes, let's get their professional views. And I know, Bruce, you had suggested like an executive summary, like here's the key, things on each of the proposals and where there's a lot of problems, perhaps. And then we talked about boards and commissions. And the facilities committee is working on something that they'd like to provide to us in terms of their views about the four different proposals and what might align best, looking at it from a master planning standpoint. The Affordable Housing Committee, the two of these had affordable housing components to them. So we could ask them to give us their views. Is this an appropriate location, do they think? And is either of these seem to be better and from their perspective, for the town? Historic District Commission, we're in a historic district. So I think there's going to have to be some sort of restrictions on any project there and get their views on what might be least impactful. And I think we have received at least we did receive a letter from them about taking into consideration the historic district, but just kind of formally adding that as a um, um, what the impact would be. And then we did receive a letter from the EDC. So if there's additional follow-up we might want to have with them. So getting kind of these formal fallbacks, and I don't know if I'm forgetting a committee that is kind of would be impacted by this, but this was kind of my first cut at at looking at this. And then I wanted to invite
Peggy, Al mentioned the police commission, so maybe we add
oh
that
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah, the police commission. We'll
Yeah.
add the police commission to that for sure. And I guess we could maybe a broader emergency services type response, because as we know, that by more housing does require more services, but also any activity there might. So maybe we have an assessment of emergency service response. So with the police and EMS. And then I wanted to have Michael Harris come back because he kind of has that big picture state view about what this could mean from an economic development standpoint, the different proposals. Also has a lot of experience in this area in terms of just how towns work with groups, with outside developers. So he could touch he can touch on some of these and rate them, a little bit more in terms of feasibility. And I think and then finally, and this is, I leave this for conversation, we have a number on demolition that we have a pretty good estimate based on Ben has presented that to the board, I think last fall, of around $3 million kind of demolition. A lot of the ideas that have been floated out there for parks and amphitheaters is somehow retaining the facade, and putting an outdoor amphitheater. There's all these different ideas out there. Do we want to even look into that further? So we can kind of check that box. And then do we want to take the public park concept and develop that more fully? I think this is a struggle because to do that, you have to understand what you want from the park, and then you have to get it, kind of more professionally developed into an actual concept. And I've heard a lot of the public is like they want that third option, right? There's housing, there's hotel, park. They want to be able to like assess all three of these. So do we want to take a deeper dive into the park? And so I leave that for the board. But so my thought is trying to set up, at least on the first three bullets, a meeting in 10 days or so that will give people adequate time to come back and give us a report that addresses a lot of these questions that the board can get from all these different segments. So I leave
Yeah,
that for
I
conversation.
think this is headed in the right direction. The reason that I had asked for that executive summary is I think, we need to see if there's anything lurking in here that would naturally disqualify one of the options. That a town department said there's no version of this that we can make fit that project kind of thing. I think we need to figure that out, and having that summary from the town departments, to the extent that it's reasonable to ask the committees and the commissions for a similar type of document, I think that would all be great as well. And I think you're headed with this Rex conversation, an actual, does the business plan for the developer work? Right? That's a question we have to ask. I can write down a great presentation or a mediocre presentation that says everything's going to be wonderful. Trust me. But that doesn't mean that it will be. And I think we need to understand that as well as we're considering these different options.
And what are your thoughts on the last bullet? The partial demolition, the park concept, putting like a broader budget together on what a park would cost and what would be in
I
that
think,
park.
yeah, I think that given the consistency of public conversation around that, it needs to be one of the things that gets talked about as we roll this out to a broader hearing style of conversation with the town. I think of it as we're trying to hone in on a referendum question that has a reasonable chance of succeeding. And so using the public hearing process and information sessions, that we start to discern what that is, what path looks like it would be successful at referendum.
Yeah, I think
And
as we're presenting information to the public, like, each option needs to be given equal weight in terms of the amount of information that we're providing to the public for their decision-making process. I think we risk skewing the process if we don't do that fully and completely.
right. And I think it's worth saying, unfortunately, we're not allowed or don't have available to us a ranked choice type of voting process to us. I know the board members all know this, but anybody who cares to listen, we can't ask the community, would you like A? If you don't get it, if that doesn't happen, what would be your second choice? What would be your third choice? That would be easy, right? We would just put all the questions out there. Everybody votes. The one that gets the most votes is the one that we go with. But we just don't have that avenue available to us.
I
Yeah.
like this idea of the park, Peggy. I think the we've seen enough on social media to suggest that the public is very interested in seeing some level of understanding of what that might look like. So I do think it's worth exploring. I think we've got some work to do with, the folks that manage the fields and play on those fields candidly, right? So there's probably some conversations that need to ensue with that as well. If I go back to can you keep that slide up for a sec? Because now I'm going to lose my train of thought.
I don't know what happened. I didn't do anything.
I'm sorry, I
it just
did that, Peggy.
Oh,
went
okay.
away. It just went away. Um,
I'll share it again.
I,
Yeah.
I guess part of me with that first bullet point is if we're asking the town staff to come back to us with some thoughts and ideas on the options, I just don't want to waste everybody's time if in fact one or a couple of those options are ones that we collectively are not thinking that we'd likely pursue anyways. And so I just, again, I'm not meaning to be controversial here, but I do think several of the options in my mind uh, pop out and I think are worth sort of putting on Bruce's executive summary. But I'm not sure one, maybe two of them should be explored much further. And I just don't want to waste people's time, I guess. Theirs and ours.
So I think though that a lot of what just, and I apologize, a lot of these questions are really more going to be a housing versus hotel conversation. You know what I mean? Not specific to one proposal. And like for septic, obviously zoning, parking requirements, obviously the affordability thing is different, right? Because some have a very different mix and have a different but I don't think we're asking them to weigh in on those specifically. I think it's more just, density, right? Um, but I'm sorry, I jumped in on Al. Was that you, Al? You were gonna
No, it was me. I was just gonna say, Scott, I agree with you that we need to be looking at whittling down the field. I don't think it's going to be fair or productive to bring four development options and a demolition option forward to a public conversation. I think it gets unruly quickly. Um, but what I'm looking for is, and I'm going to pick on septic, not because of anything other than it's the first bullet point. Um, if we were to find out that there is, no version of um, high density housing that the septic can work on for that property, well, then I mean that informs our decision about what moves forward. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen or say that I believe that that's the answer. I'm just using it as an example of as much as we may want the hotel, there is no version of the septic system that will service that hotel, right? That would be important to know early in the conversation.
and I think we would after this next meeting, I think is when we would cut the list, right? I think then we've got a lot of good feedback. We've gotten a lot of questions answered. And then that gives us an opportunity to say, okay, out of these, we think this is the one that has the most um, legs, so to speak, right, to take to the next step. I would think, we would be able to do that after this next meeting, but let's see what we get back.
The only other idea, and I think we've talked offline, just briefly about it, but do we need to have some sort of opinion about any further RFP process for this? Should we? Do we need to? Are we obligated to? I think we should probably figure that out. Um, and again, I'm not looking for any particular answer other than the question's been asked and answered.
Yeah, I agree that that's going to be part of our conversation. I think once we get all this information back. about how we would proceed. You know, if we pick say we said we definitely want housing and example only, we might want to refine that down even more because we really did, it was very open-ended when we did the expression of interest process, right? Um, so I think that's part of the conversation that we need to have. So if everybody's good with this, I think though, getting back to the park concept, um, in order to develop a park idea, we would need to have some sort of design concept. So are we willing to, have somebody work with us to come up with like a draft of a park concept for this and a budget? Because obviously what's here is just demo and maybe some grass.
I feel like we
Um,
have to be okay with it from what we're hearing from the community. I feel like the community is directing us to take that step, um, so that when we present whatever options they are to the public in terms of a referendum question, that they have all of the information available to them to make that decision. And the only way to do that is to spend some planning dollars.
So I will come back with what that would look like and require and timeline and all that at our next meeting. Okay?
Maybe as a baseline, you know, just a picnic area as a a bottom line um, minimum, um, which would just be the grass, right? Be grass and picnic tables.
Hmm. Well, I think we can pull that together pretty
Right.
quickly.
And to Jen's point, I'm not suggesting that's what it ultimately be, but
Right.
if we can set a baseline expectation and then everything goes up from there.
Okay. Um, and then just so I want to get back to the town boards and commission list. The other one I think we should do is beach and recreation because of the fields impact. And the adjacency and the park potentially, right? So I would add beach and rec to this list as well.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
So, okay. All right, good. Well, I think we've got a good way to move forward. And
Just
then
just to put a fine point on it, I did allude to it, but I think if we are looking to explore the park concept, we need to go talk to Madison Little League, senior softball, and a couple of those groups as well. So I don't know how that
yeah.
factors into the slide, but just more conversations.
Yeah, and I guess I saw beach and rec as that conduit, but yes, exactly. The whole fields discussion. Okay, so we will move on. Hopefully this will go quickly. Next on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve accepting the local transportation capital improvement program LOTSIP grant for Cops Road and Warpers Road construction in the amount of 2,570,000 and to authorize the first selectman to sign all contracts and documents associated with this award approved by Board of Finance 1/21/26.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this was actually approved by Board of Finance because we're actually going, I think we're in process of bidding. This is just closing the loop on a grant we already applied to we already approved to apply for, and then we received just the project authorization letter recently, and they want to go out to bid on this. So this has been a project that's been in CIP for a while. The state is paying for 100% of it. And it'll be a great project. It's on one of our collector roads, so well needed. Any further questions? No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Okay, great. Next item is discuss and take action to approve the lots of grant for the construction of sidewalk and crosswalk improvements along Boson Post Road, sidewalks and crosswalks in the amount of 1,845,600, and to authorize the first selectwoman to sign all contracts and documents associated with this award, pending Board of Finance approval. So this is another one. We're going to be going out to bid soon on this one as well. The public hearing was held, and you guys had the design plans and all that at our last meeting. So, any further questions on that?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It'll be exciting to see that one move forward. Item number 11 is discuss and take action to approve calling the annual town meeting on Wednesday, February 11th, 2026 at 7 p.m. at the town campus, 8 Campus Drive, Hammonasset Room, for the following: review state of the town report, B, review the 5-year capital plan, and C, to receive the annual report of the permanent boards, commissions, agencies, committees, and the town's audit report in accordance with Article 2, Section 2.1 of the town charter. Can I get a
So
motion?
moved.
Oh, second.
Okay, and this is just, we do the annual presentation that we do every year, just giving update on where the town is and all these different things and required by the charter. All in favor, say aye.
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 Excellent. And then finally, 12 is discuss and take action to approve calling a public hearing on Monday, February 23rd, 2026 at 6 p.m. in town campus, 8 Campus Drive, room C, Hammonasset Room, in remote via Zoom for the purpose of a budget presentation by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, conducted by the Board of Finance in accordance with the town charter, I can't talk, 10.4A. All in favor, sir. So can I get a motion?
So moved.
Okay, and this is just us formally calling the public hearing that we see through the budget process. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, got that done. Okay, last item is 13 is citizens' comments. Are there any hands raised?
Yes, there are. Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Hi. Thanks for getting back to me. Just listening to the facilities presentation, and one of the things that I thought of listening to it was that they were bored. When you guys seem to beat up Bruce on it a little bit, and I kind of understand what he was talking about. Um, I think when Al's, I've got to paraphrase because I tried to write it down, but Al said, that they're going to look at these properties. Board of Selectmen could create proposals for use of the property to submit to the public. So, that's a process that you're going to go through, and you're going to say, we feel we could do these things with these properties, but we don't know that there's actually a need or a desire for it, right? And then when we were talking about the academy and the different proposals, Scott said, we really probably don't want to waste everybody's time that's involved if we feel these things aren't going to go forward. So if we don't, why are we looking to get these properties, and do things on them? I think it should be inventoried. This is, what we have available. And as if a need comes up over the years, we can look at the inventory and say, maybe this would fit on this property. So I just kind of feel like maybe you didn't understand what Bruce was saying, and hopefully you tried to, explain it and understood what he was saying. But thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We have another.
Yeah, go ahead, Vance.
Okay. Hi, good evening. It's Vance Taylor. I just had a few quick comments. One was regarding the academy proposals and taking a look at the feasibility of each one in terms of infrastructure and other things. And I guess I would just put out to the board and Peggy and to your colleagues whether or not this is maybe then the opportune time to revisit having Madison opt into the Municipal Redevelopment Authority, David Corr's organization, since certainly monies are available for infrastructure upgrades, as you know, also for feasibility studies. So if park and reuse of Memorial Town Hall and reuse of Academy and all those things seem to integrate well into what David's plan is for redevelopment and improvements to a downtown, then maybe this is a good time to explore that further about whether or not you as the board see the benefits or not of opting into this program, knowing there's no obligations to do it. The only other comment I wanted to make was just again from my experience a little bit with RFPs, and at this case the expressions of interest that we received. Since those expressions really cast such a wide net with the way we designed the expression and the invitation to express, it just seems to me going, and this again, just personally, I would be concerned going through yet another exhaustive process with RFPs and vetting and touring. The town clearly has had its fair share of journeys with this property. My view is I just think it would be probably disheartening to those who spent the time to come forward in the original offer of an invitation to propose, and B, now feeling like suddenly the doors open again and their ideas potentially are now being borrowed by others who make presentations subsequent. So those are the only two things I wanted to comment on. And just one other sort of passing comment. It's as a member of the facilities committee, it's a bit disheartening that within less than an hour of hearing David do his very thorough presentation, that I'm already seeing Facebook lighting up with sensationalism and misrepresentation of information with comments like the facilities committee decided to do this without being asked specific to captioned new theater at Memorial Town Hall. So it's again, I'm a relatively new member to the committee, as you know. I appreciate the opportunity, but I have to say, it's very saddening to me to think that with efforts that have been expended by our committee to immediately have it be misrepresented on Facebook is pretty poor form. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work on the committee.
Robert, go ahead.
How you doing, guys? Robert Letskis, 32 Hathaway Lane, Madison. Just wanted to commend you guys for looking into all of the not only the committee's responses to this, but also engaging professionals to actually look at the feasibility of what's offered to us. But not only the academy, where everybody knows I have a proposal on, but the other areas in town. Because I mean, the reality is you can have a lot that's 100 acres that is just you can't do anything with it. So, going back to academy, I think that it's very important to have the pros come in and look at the feasibility of everything. I think Rex development is key. I think having the facilities committee, EDC, even historic, the police, the residents. I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is all of these meetings are available to us as residents, every single one. It's really tough to go on. I mean, it's really easy to go on a Monday morning quarterback and say, oh my God, this is happening, that's happening, so on and so forth. The reality is, guys, as a public, as a community, we have the opportunity to listen to every single thing that's said. It's all public. So, and what the last gentleman just mentioned, Lee Vance, had mentioned, it's true. I mean, the reality is sit through the meetings, listen to what's being proposed, offer some input, and maybe you can help, volunteer or do something like that. I think I commend you. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I think it's really smart to listen to the public and look at the feasibility of everything before you make any decisions. I mean, I could say I want to build a casino, exit 1 or exit 62 rather, but is it feasible? Yes or no? That's the thing. So having the professionals here, I think is awesome. And kudos to you guys for that.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other hands raised, Jeannie?
There are not.
Okay, going once, going twice. All right, with that then, with that, I guess, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thanks, guys. Stay warm
Aye.
tonight. Bye-bye.
Aye.